The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on an initiative called Engineering with Nature. It all started in 2010. And this is the EWN Podcast. EWN is developing and implementing nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It's bringing together a growing international community of scientists, engineers, and researchers from all kinds of disciplines that are committed to harnessing the power of nature to solve problems. The EWN Podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
Welcome to Season 6, Episode 1 of the Engineering with Nature podcast. Today I'm here with a very special guest, Jeff King, National Lead of the Engineering with Nature Program. Jeff took on the role at the beginning of March 2023. We're kicking off Season 6 by having an in-depth conversation with Jeff as my guest about his vision for Engineering with Nature and where he wants to take the program and what's ahead for 2023. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Sarah. Good to be back with you and looking forward to an exciting season this year.
Me too. I understand we are now, this will be our 61st show of the Engineering with Nature podcast. Isn't that astonishing?
I just can't believe it, Sarah. I mean, really, if you stop to think about it, and the fact that back in the summer of 2020, you and I were just sort of brainstorming the ideas of what we could possibly do, and podcasts seem to be like at the top of the list. So really, really great to see that, it's advanced to where it is today and that we continue to have so many people interested in our podcast.
Me too. And I hope our listenership continues to grow in Season 6.
Yes, me too.
Let's start off our conversation by talking about the theme for Season 6, which is expanding the EWN Lattice. You coined this theme. Tell us, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So when we think about a lattice, it has several definitions, and I'm not talking about a lattice that's used for fencing or that's used to support climbing plants, although the thought of climbing plants in a lattice sounds very intriguing to me from the standpoint of EWN. But what I'm thinking about is something that we actually do see in nature. It's something like with ice crystals, the symmetrical geometric shapes that are arranged in three-dimensional patterns. And for me, this idea of expanding the Engineering with Nature lattice sort of takes that shape and sort of thinking through a lattice and how everything fits together, particularly when we think about the Engineering with Nature initiative. As an analogy, the expanding lattice really starts to make sense in terms of Engineering with Nature when I think about building out all of the elements that support and enable expansion of things like nature-based solutions. And really, it's the people, it's the projects, it's the policies that determine what can and can't be done with respect to nature-based solutions. And it's also the geography and how all of these things fit and intertwine so completely to form a lattice. And so we can drill down into that a little bit deeper. So for example, with people, we're talking about very diverse groups of scientists and engineers and landscape architects and leaders in government. We're talking about representatives of First Nations and also folks that are associated with non-for-profit organizations and also academia. And if we think about projects and policy, we're talking about cutting-edge science and engineering. We're talking about nature-based solutions, the projects that have been designed and constructed and put in the ground. And then with policies, those are what are being implemented to advance practice and to streamline use of nature-based solutions. So highlighting all of these pieces and how they all fit together, for me, is how we're thinking about expanding the Engineering with Nature lattice.
I think that's really cool. When you first mentioned it about a month ago when we were in Vicksburg, I thought, that's a kind of intriguing idea. But the more I've thought about it, and as you explain it, it's a little bit geeky, Jeff. I'll give you that. But,
Here we go again.
It's a little bit geeky, but I think it's a really interesting concept. And I think it really does reflect where Engineering with Nature is going. It is growing in a very holistic way. We're getting into much larger, more complex projects with many, many more partners and collaborators, and working with people at the community level. It's just, I think it just sort of is a good picture. So that's our theme for season 6. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. And I think you've summed it up very nicely there. I mean, if you think about sort of where we were in previous seasons, and we talked about up with engineering with nature, well, we've seen an explosion in terms of interest with respect to engineering with nature, and it's all around us now. And so now it's how do we expand that lattice, and how are all of those different pieces interconnected, and being able to bring that out in these stories that we share through podcast. I think that's going to be really impactful.
I think it is too. And the thing about all of the pieces building on each other takes me back to early episodes that we did in season 5, including the one about measuring what matters with Todd Bridges and Justin Aaronworth, talking about the bottom line of the conference was the imperative to take action on nature-based solutions now. Many of the guests that spoke at the conference said, we have 10 years to make a difference. So to me, the lattice fits into that. The more people and projects that are involved in engineering nature and nature-based solutions, the faster this is going to grow out.
Indeed. And Sarah, I think that you're spot on with that assessment. And I think about the formation of ice crystals and watching them grow and proliferate. And that's exactly what you're describing. And that's where we're headed, I think, in this season, is to show that proliferation of innovation, engineering with nature topics, the solutions, and having our listeners be exposed to all of that information.
So I think that's great. I think that's a really great way to kick off season 6. And that's a good explanation. I want to take a minute to talk about you. As you know, we often start our podcast by asking our guests about their personal journeys, how they got to where they are today, what drives them, what their passions are. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to be the second only national lead of the Engineering with Nature program.
Well, Sarah, where to start with a question like that? I guess I won't bore our listeners too much, and I'll just kind of stay to the highlights here. But few people know that I started my federal career in Savannah District at the Corps of Engineers in Savannah, Georgia. And it was there that I had a chance to work in regulatory as well as planning divisions, and had quite a lot of opportunities to work in wetlands, wetland systems, also working in coastal marsh systems, and really had a fond appreciation of those types of natural systems and the importance that they have within the landscape, and how people look at the importance of those different types of features. And so from the work in Savannah, I had a chance to do a lot of wetland restoration work as well as island creation work, working with colleagues at the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography as well as Savannah State University. And that was a really wonderful experience for me. And from there, went to NOAA and National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and working within the National Ocean Service at a laboratory in Charleston, South Carolina, Hollins Marine Laboratory, and worked there for about 5 years. Really enjoyed it. A lot of wonderful, interesting research happening. But during that time, we had Hurricane Sandy that hit up in the Northeast. And it was shortly after Hurricane Sandy that the Corps of Engineers had coined the phrase natural and nature-based features. And ERDIC, the U.S. Army's Engineering Research and Development Center, had released a publication that talked about the value and use of natural nature-based features in the landscape. And so I had a chance to review that document and was certainly familiar with Todd Bridges' work. We had talked quite a bit back in the time when I was at Savannah District. But Todd and I started talking about what it would look like if there was a collaboration that occurred between the Corps and NOAA to find opportunities for collaboration focused on natural nature-based features. So Todd and I hosted this workshop that occurred in March of 2016 at the Hollins Marine Laboratory, and it was well attended. A lot of exciting conversations that occurred, identified a lot of interesting projects, many of which we've talked about on these podcasts. And from there, I really saw an opportunity to sort of continue to advance this knowledge of use of natural nature-based features, to be more directly involved again with this science, this engineering practice. And so that's when I made the jump back over to working directly with Todd and Engineering with Nature within the Army's Engineer Research and Development Center. And so the rest is history. I came over in 2016, summer of 2016, started working directly with Todd, and just really so grateful for that opportunity, and continue to just count my blessings every day when I look at how much we've done within Engineering with Nature, and just all the exciting people that I've had a chance to meet and work with, and just continuing to hopefully share their stories and see even more progress in this space.
I remember that conference, and it really was a seminal moment for not just you personally, but for the Engineering with Nature initiative back in the day. It really was the first major collaboration, and so many projects that we've talked about on the podcast came out of that initial meeting. And boy, I sure remember meeting you for the first time, Jeff, in the at headquarters. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
At headquarters.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So my duty station, that's right. It was in headquarters, and you and I had a chance to meet shortly thereafter. And that was when I think we started working on the strategic plan together.
I think so.
The strategic plan that we put together, and then also ideas like the podcast and others that we've implemented.
That all came out of that. And I think we just kind of clicked. So...
Well, we're joined at the hip now, Sarah. I mean, we've been doing this now for so long. I mean, really, you're just so aligned with Engineering with Nature, and certainly we value everything that you've contributed to our program as well.
Well, it sure has been fun to be part of the evolution. So we were talking about the fact that Engineering with Nature really started out as sort of a little experiment. It was on the side of the desk kind of experiment, and Todd thought that, he had this little handful of people and maybe something could happen. And we did the first 5-year strategic plan and achieved it all in about 3.5 years, and then went on and developed the next 5-year strategic plan. And what's happened is Engineering with Nature has become a program. It's really started a movement. And now you have the policies at all different levels, including at the federal level, to support the next phase of Engineering with Nature. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your vision and where you'd like to see Engineering with Nature go.
So much in the way of success has occurred with the initiative and then the program. And certainly with what we have in place, we would see more of that success occurring. And we've, I think, prioritized collaboration in ways that strengthen the program. And certainly I'm thinking about the Network for Engineering with Nature. And obviously there are others even outside of the network that are contributing greatly to our understanding and advancing this idea of integrating nature-based solutions into our overall strategies for creating resilience. So there's those kinds of connections that we want to continue to build on, to grow, to enhance, because of the added value that brings, not just for the Engineering with Nature program, but for all involved and all that want to see nature-based solutions be prioritized in terms of what is an additional tool in the toolbox.
Jeff, you were the one that really brought landscape architects into the family of Engineering with Nature. And what a tremendous difference that's made to how you and your colleagues think about projects.
Well, and Sarah, that's a good point. I have to give all the credit to the landscape architects because they really did open my eyes to the possibilities there. And what I really appreciate about their capabilities, their skill sets, is that it really does create this common denominator for how to communicate and visualize opportunities when it comes to nature-based solutions. And for me, that's incredibly valuable because I know that not everyone is seeing the same thing in their mind when it comes to a project as it's described, or perhaps as it is being offered in the way of metrics, or how it's being conveyed in the way of model outputs. With landscape architecture, you have this opportunity to create different drawings and renderings, and you can superimpose those into an existing landscape so that when you are talking with communities or the public, and it is a very diverse group of people, that you can share these images and to be able to talk about it. And what does it mean for those communities in the future should a project like this go forward? And I think having everybody there together, understanding what a project ultimately is going to look like, and then using all of these other capabilities and skill sets to be able to offer more information, that really does help to round out and complete, this understanding that I think everybody needs to have, certainly at the very beginning of a project, and then there at the end as it's being finally completed in the way of construction, and you're shifting more towards the monitoring and the adaptive management.
In all of my work over the years, I would say that building shared understanding is a critical success factor for any project. You need to do that from the beginning, and by bringing in different disciplines like landscape architects who can help be that bridge to people with different experiences, including traditional ecological knowledge, bring all of that perspective to the table at the design phase. It's just so critically important. And I know that that kind of collaboration is one of the keys to success that you're going to be focusing on going forward.
Absolutely, Sarah. And, I do see more and more opportunity, certainly within the Corps, to be able to work closely with our core districts when it comes to identifying opportunities to integrate engineering with nature into future projects. And so I see that as another big driver for us going forward, where now with legislation being what it is, communities and stakeholders wanting to see nature-based solutions as part of an overall strategy for creating resilience, that the Engineering with Nature initiative and all of those that are affiliated with it will be working collaboratively with core districts and others to identify those opportunities where we can add more projects and create a more comprehensive approach to resilience, but also creating value for communities, whether it be social benefits or environmental benefits.
I think the other thing too that, we've talked a lot about, and certainly we've talked about it in previous podcasts, is the synergies with your other federal agency partners. You really set the standard with your work with NOAA, but that has to build out. It has to be a much bigger part of the lattice going forward with other projects, other landscape scale projects particularly, just because they're so big and so complex.
You see it a lot with this administration, and certainly their interest in having all of the federal agencies be unified in their approach to nature-based solutions. And Heather and Lydia both have done an extremely good job for being able to align all of the federal agencies and to help to prioritize what will be some of those actions that the federal agencies will move out on collaboratively to see nature-based solutions be prioritized going forward. And I, within the Engineering with Nature program, see tremendous opportunity as well. So you mentioned our collaborations with NOAA. We certainly will continue those. I see a lot of opportunity, for example, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They also have expressed a lot of interest in natural infrastructure, nature-based solutions, and likewise with the National Park Service, and having more of their historic sites integrate natural infrastructure into the landscape to retain a lot of the sort of natural landscape as well as the cultural and historic heritage that those sites they have. So those are just some examples, but certainly much broader in terms of federal agency involvement and wanting to accelerate use of natural nature-based features.
And you've also set up really interesting relationships with the not-for-profit organizations, the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, organizations like that are critical and restores America's estuaries, as we talked about in season 5. These kinds of organizations that are working on the ground and are critical to the success of projects going forward.
That's right, Sarah. And, we haven't even talked about the military side of our portfolio and how much that has grown, and working with more than 17 different installations around the country right now to have nature-based solutions be included as part of their resilience strategies. But those non-governmental organizations like the Nature Conservancy and others figure prominently into how those projects can ultimately be developed and pursued. And so when we think about work on military installations, we can't just think about it from the standpoint of what's happening on the installation itself,
right,
within the fence line. We're talking about opportunity to create system scale resilience inside and outside the fence line. And there's so many wonderful examples where entities like TNC are making huge contributions when it comes to thinking about systems level kinds of approaches for resilience.
Oh, I think I hear a couple of podcast topics. Stay tuned.
That's right. Our listeners, this is how we do it. This is how we brainstorm and actually come up with some of these ideas. So you're absolutely right.
Well, we know that we'd like to get at least one show in this season 6 about talking about some of the cool work being done on military installations. So stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so many wonderful opportunities happening there, and would be very excited to share with our listeners different examples of nature-based solutions as they are being applied in places like Hawaii or out in the desert Southwest or in the Southeast. Just exciting to know that there are people within Department of Defense that get this, that really understand it, want to see it happen. So we're going to share those stories as well.
It's going to be it's really an exciting time for you and for your colleagues. You have a really wonderful team that work with you on the Engineering with Nature program. I know you've got a lot of things on the slate for this year. What are some of the highlights? What do you want to accomplish this year?
Yeah. Well, Sarah, you make a good point here, because it is a team. It is not one person. It never has been one person. There is a large number of people that are working every day to be able to advance practice within the Engineering with Nature initiative. And we have 60 active, ongoing R&D projects within the Engineering with Nature portfolio right now.
That's pretty impressive.
That's the largest number we've ever had. And behind each of those projects is a PI that is just really working very hard with their teams to deliver the products that advance practice and our understanding of nature-based solutions. And so my other vision here is that we open that aperture larger so that we are more inclusive, and we're bringing those individuals into this space of the podcast to be able to share their stories and to offer highlights of what's been happening with their research. And so there'll be others that we bring in that will co-host with you to share different perspectives and insights. I know probably our listeners get tired of hearing me, ramble on about things. So I want to respect that. I want to get other people in here sharing their stories. I think that there are so many talented individuals out there, and we just want to give them that chance as well. So to your other point, thinking about what we have in store for this year, lot of larger strategic types of initiatives underway within the program. I think about the fact that we just recently released the call for projects to include an Atlas Volume 3.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be an activity that we continue to pursue over the course of the next several months to be able to develop the next Atlas. We will certainly keep our listeners informed as to the progress that's being made there, and then also when that release happens. But I see that as another opportunity to sort of continue the tradition within the program and really let people know around the world all the great work that's happening and the contributions that are being made with projects that have been put in place. So that's a big effort that we have going on. We certainly recognize that 2023 will bring about yet another conclusion of a 5-year strategic plan, again, having accomplished all of those milestones that we had identified. And so this year, we've started to develop the next 5-year plan. We'll be putting that in place. And my intent will be that we have that published early in 2024.
Excellent.
Calendar year 2024. So we'll have that out and people will be able to take a look at it. And certainly thinking about all of the progress that's been made in this space, we want to be mindful of that. We want to recognize that and then plot the course for what we will see happening in the next 5 years. And so, there'll be other things that are happening too with participation by EWN in different conferences and workshops and venues. And I think our listeners have really appreciated that we've brought in folks like Daniel Hayden with Ray to share insight in terms of their mission, but also what was happening at events like that. So I would like to see us continue with those kinds of podcasts where if we have participated in a conference or a workshop, that we bring in people that were participating, that had a really good story to share, and make those stories and messages heard to a larger audience.
Well, yeah, we're really trying to connect people with the ideas, and really expand out the network and the people that are thinking about and talking about nature-based solutions. So that's a really primary goal for us and for the Engineering with Nature program. And I think another one that we should touch on, Jeff, is inspiring the future, inspiring the engineers, scientists, landscape architects.
That's right.
The people who are students today, inspiring them for the really critical and important work ahead in natural and nature-based solutions.
Well, absolutely. And that's such a good point. I mean, those are the individuals that I get emails from and stop me when I'm in a conference or see me, out working with others that really want to know, hey, I really like engineering with nature. How do I get involved? Or what was the path you took that got you into this kind of work? And so I think that is absolutely got to be a fundamental part of what it is we're doing. So within the Network for Engineering with Nature, we continue to build out courses and topics that students can actually be part of when it comes to engineering with nature or nature-based solutions, and having those students be immersed in this in different ways, whether it be a podcast or courses or hands-on learning experiences. That matters because the reality is I won't be here forever. Many of my colleagues won't be working around here forever. And so we've got to be able to have that next generation of scientists and engineers and policy experts and others that can come in and help us continue to advance this practice. And so we see that as being critical, and we want to be able to support those individuals that are currently students and looking to have a place.
I think that's really important. And I think that the Network for Engineering with Nature is such an important vehicle for expanding the lattice. It really expands the reach and hopefully inspires future generations. And I also,
absolutely.
I also think it's really important to engage, inspire, and turn up the heat a bit on accelerating advancing engineering with nature and nature-based solutions. I mean, You and your colleagues said it at the Measuring What Matters Summit. Basically, the conclusion of the conference was we've got 10 years to work collaboratively and make a difference here. We have to get to work on implementing natural and nature-based solutions to address climate change adaptation and resilience. So I think as part of the strategic plan going forward, it's advancing the practice of engineering with nature, but it's also accelerating it, which is what you're doing with the Lattice. It's very cool.
Well, and Sarah, that's sort of where I was going to go to, is that to be able to accelerate, you got to have a much larger network and people that are all rowing in the same direction. And I think that's where that expansion of the Engineering with Nature Lattice really comes into play. And we want to harness that energy. We want to harness the wonderful information that is being made available to decision makers and to be able to have that implemented and put into practice.
Well, Jeff, you've got a lot to accomplish in a year and big things ahead, a fantastic team. How would you summarize it? How would you say, here's what we got to do in the next year?
Well, I always think about it in the context of bite-sized pieces and slow and steady wins the race. So if I were to just sort of look at it in its entirety, it can be overwhelming. But if I look at it in incremental steps, it's something that can be done. And I recognize that there is a large, wonderful team of organizational sectors and multidisciplinary personnel and participants that are all helping to move the needle in this space. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I know we're going to be successful, is it's going to be a large group of people harmonized with one key objective in sight, which is to be ready for the future and to mitigate risk associated with climate change through use of nature-based solutions. And that, to me, is doable, and we will accomplish it.
I absolutely agree. And I think the more people that are exposed to this thinking, the more people that are looking for holistic solutions, incorporating nature-based solutions, the more people that are engaged right down to the community level, as we talked about, the faster this is going to happen. The lattice will grow out and it'll start growing organically. And I think it already has. So it's very, very exciting time, Jeff. And it's wonderful to see you at the helm. It's you're the right guy at the right time in the right place to really seize this movement and take it to the next level.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I do appreciate that very much. And certainly very grateful to the Corps of Engineers and my colleagues at the Army's Engineer Research and Development Center for this extraordinary opportunity.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot more about it in season 6 in the weeks to come. Thanks for being our special guest today, Jeff. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. If you have any comments about this episode or anything that we're working on in the Engineering with Nature program, please give us a call or drop us a note. Details are on the Engineering with Nature website. And we sure hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll listen to us again when we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN Podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN Podcast is produced by iContact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.